Members Perfect Garcia, Elo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, and Martinez have notified us that they will be absent from today's proceedings. All remaining board members will be participating in person. Member Gloria?
Present.
Member Gomez? Here. Member Medina?
Here.
Member Sanchez? Member Vargas?
Where's here?
Right, Chair Shu?
Yeah.
I apologize for the disorder, and Member Bush.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you provide information on public testimony and instructions? And then we'll take public comment, non-agendized public comment.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I would ask members of the public that have requested to speak on this item here in the conference room to please approach the podium at this time. Those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or pressing *9 now.
We'll go ahead with the public comment with the first speaker.
Thank you, Chair Shu. We have two in-person requests to speak under non-agenda public comment. I will be calling the in-person speakers by name. I will call members of the public joining virtually by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You will hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. At that time, please press *6 to unmute your phone and state your name for the audio record. All speakers in person and via teleconference will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please self-regulate your time. I will ask that you conclude your comments at the end of your time. I would remind teleconference speakers to mute their live stream before they begin speaking. Our first speaker is Cesar Javier. Please begin by stating your name for the audio record.
Good afternoon. The County City Municipal Code Ruling 11 accepting ceramics kiln from permit is the same city municipal code being implemented by the city. The same ordinance basically used by the city treasurer's office permitting a business type non-metallic mineral manufacturing owned and operated by Donald Fraser with worker wife Evelyn Fraser at 5238 Streamview Drive, San Diego, California 92105. The home occupation is actually ceramics, factory manufacturing, and its home industrial makeshift situated in a residential zone dedicated neighborhood since 1984. Science and research studies have declared this economic activity to be hazardous because of toxicity it produces, generates an immense and repetitive cycle of hitting clay mixed with chemicals. It potentially impacts health, safety, and public welfare. It potentially impacts health, safety, and public welfare. Inhalation of poison gas and possible ingestions of toxic airborne contaminants, particulates, and dust will lead to respiratory diseases and lung cancer. Moreover, it has harmful effect to our ecology and environment, including flora and fauna. The ceramics manufacturing is in violation of California use and planning laws on the use of land or variance within provides in general that project business activity shall be in accord with health, safety, and public welfare, no special privilege.
No special privilege.
Ms. Javier, I would ask that you conclude your comments at this time.
Yeah, 3 minutes. Can I have?
Has Ms. Burita concluded her comments?
Yes.
Okay, one moment. For the audio record, I would like to correct the record to indicate that Burita Javier was our first speaker today. And now I would like to call Mr. Cesar Javier. Please state your name for the audio record.
Thank you, ma'am. It is also in violation of the city, Diego City, ruling on home occupation of July 2020 on nuisance. Honorable Mayor, don't take note. I gave all the letters to your office, and the last one was at 1 p.m. at the environmental committee meeting. It is also in violation of the social justice that is obtaining in our neighborhood. Our Vietnamese neighbors disengages when it comes to this kind of crusade for health and safety concern. Big question why. The district staff, District 9, Mr. Peralta said, we need more complaints so we could address that issue. So what can we do? We are only the smallest political unit that is now present before you. The only advantage now is we can amplify right direct to our honorable mayor, whom I heard I am not done yet. Congratulations, Your Honor. And so we would like to plead, let's validate this City Municipal Code 11. Allow the ability, the capacity of the most qualified investigator, the police, the compliance enforcement, the hazardous materials from the county, the environmental enforcement, so that we could validate whether this ruling is faulty or not. And let's have a change, because we need to change amendments, possibly to repeal this exempt ceramics kiln. That is our voice. And we address this because we are now together, sir. We have been watching you, we are trying to reach you. We have seen you at the Alcala Church. We have seen you at the New Creation Church, if only to amplify this. We call God to help us. Assemblyman Vargas, Juan Vargas, David Alvarez, who else? Mom Forbes, many times in person, and they're helping us. And now we expect a niche, a glorious pathway, morally based, because we are now amplifying it to the characters of the law. Thank you. And good afternoon.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Bortoff. Mr. Bortoff, please unmute your mic now and begin by stating your name for the audio record.
There, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Good afternoon. My name is John Bodorf with CleanEarthForKids.org. According to the San Diego APCD 2021 Annual Air Quality Report and the 2022 Regional Air Quality Strategy, residential fuel combustion, which is wood burning, is tied with construction and demolition as the main sources of PM 2.5 in San Diego County. Wood burning dumps almost 3.5 tons of particulate matter into our air every day. And it also dumps into our air almost 0.5 ton of volatile organic compounds every single day. It is incredibly important to reduce our particulate matter levels, and that means stopping wood smoke. Regulating wood burning must be a top priority now. PM 2.5 is especially dangerous. These particles are 2.5 microns in diameter, much smaller than the width of a human hair, which is 50 microns. These microscopic particles can penetrate deep into the lungs, get into our bloodstream, and even get into our organs and brains. Research clearly shows exposure to particulate matter increases the risk of serious health outcomes, including asthma, pre-birth, birth defects, hypertension, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and brain conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. Particulate matter can cause immediate asthma attacks, heart attacks, and strokes. Particulate matter from things like wood smoke hurts both our indoor and outdoor air quality. Wood smoke also contains nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, methane, carbon dioxide, and cancer-causing pollutants like benzene, formaldehyde, acrolein, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. Burning 10 pounds of wood in 1 hour creates the same cancer-causing PAHs as 6,000 packs of cigarettes. That's like smoking a pack of cigarette a day for 16 years just by sitting next to a wood fire. Other air districts have regulated wood burning for decades. There is no reason why this cannot be done here in San Diego. The APCD needs to prioritize stopping wood burning in the county. We also ask you to work with cities like Oceanside to stop recreational wood fires on the beaches and also work with the county, state, and federal agencies to get the lead out of aviation fuel. Thank you from cleanearthforkids.org, and let's get our air clean. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Shu, that concludes public comment for non-agenda public communication.
Thank you, Mia. I just want to make a kind of a quick request to our air pollution control officer. We've heard from the Caesar and Rita Javier a few times. I'm wondering if the board can get a quick report on that sometime in the future, not necessarily now. We don't normally respond to public comments immediately, but just a quick report in the future would be fine.
We can provide some high-level responses to those comments today, if you would, if the chair would like.
If you like, you can. I know this is not something that was on the agenda, so I don't think it's
Just maybe a brief summary of what we've seen at that address. Okay.
Sure.
This is, I'll introduce our Chief of Compliance, William Shaw.
Hello, thank you. So. Can you hear me? It's fine. Okay, great. Thank you for that question. Actually, yes, the update on this is the district has investigated this location 6 separate times, so the last 2 years, twice in the middle of the night. Our goal is to be on site when these odors occur. And so at the request of Mr. Javier, we've been there in the middle of the night, during the day, multiple times. And each time we're not documented any for violations. The ceramics kiln does not require, it's exempt from permitting from the district based on size of the unit as well as the type of fuel that is used. So at this point, we are dedicated to continue. If there are more complaints, if there was more interest, as it sounds there is, to continue to investigate. All we need to know is when it's occurring so we can follow up. And we will also continue on this side. Right, as was mentioned before, be in the area to monitor.
Any questions? I guess we'll probably won't have a discussion on this, but thank you very much.
There's no need for discussion, but I don't know where the address is. I mean, I got the document, but I don't know exactly where the address is. But you don't have to give it to me now, but
Is
it on there?
Yeah, it's at the back.
It's at the bottom of the 2-page.
Oh, there you go. I missed the second paragraph. I read over it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your reports. With that, we can go to the next agenda item E1, which is appointment of standing committee members. I'm sorry, I should say that there's no consent calendar for this meeting, so we'll just pass that. We need to also approve a statement of proceedings from the January 11th meeting. So clerk, do you have any instructions for public comments for that?
Thank you, Chair Shu. I would ask members of the public that have requested to speak on this item here in the conference room to please approach the podium at this time. Those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raised hand feature on the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Chair Shu, seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to address the board under this item.
Thank you. Any comments from board members? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the proceedings.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Vargas,
Second.
seconded by Mayor Sanchez. I'll just ask all in favor of approving the proceedings, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions, no. We'll take it that the proceedings have been approved.
Chair Shu, that item passes with all members of the board present voting aye, with the exceptions of members Burbeck Garcia, Ilo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, and Martinez, who are absent.
And I'll go back to what I jumped into, but there's no consent calendar items for this meeting. We'll go to item E1, which is appointment of standing committee or standing committee of planning and policy. So I'll ask the clerk to provide any information on public comment.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I would ask those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raised hand feature on the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of staff presentations.
And let's go ahead and have our air pollution control officer, Paula Forbes, give us some comments on this item.
Thank you, Chairperson, board members. Just as a brief introduction, this item is for the board to elect the members of the Planning and Policy Committee. Its members and officers for the remainder of the 2024 calendar year. And per the governing board bylaws, nominations to the committee are made by Chair Shu, subject to the approval of the full board. The Planning and Policy Committee is tasked with work on our strategic planning process, as well as legislative and policy priority guidelines. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Shu.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Chair Shu, seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public requesting to speak on this item.
Thank you. No public comments. We'll go on to making my nominations. So for the Planning and Policy Committee, which I think is a very important part of what we do here on this board, my understanding is a member Gomez is stepping away from this committee, and I'd like to replace her with member Dr. Burbeck Garcia, and to have Enrique be our chair, and Enrique Mina be the chair, and Burbeck be the vice chair. Members Bush and Mayor Sanchez and I will continue to be on the subcommittee. Any discussion?
Need a motion?
I need a motion to approve the suggestion. Thank you.
Awesome.
So it's moved by Vargas and seconded by Sanchez. You want a roll call vote on this? I'll just try to make it faster here. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All nay say nay. Hearing none. Any abstentions? None.
Chair Shu, with members Burbeck Garcia, Ilo Rivera, Lawson Reamer, and Martinez absent, that motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Great, thank you. Well, I don't know if Enrique, you want to make any comments since you'll be the new chair.
I'll just make it brief. Thank you very much for appointing me. I'll be glad to serve in that position and follow Georgette's steps, and she did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette, for chairing that for a number of years, and I look forward to having Enrique's leadership on that subcommittee. Let's move on to E2, adoption of proposed amendments to Rule 40. This item has been pulled, and I'm going to note that for this item, we'll still take public testimony, but it will be tabled to a later meeting. So with that, Ask the clerk for public testimony instructions.
Thank you, Chair Shu. Just a correction to the record. This item has been withdrawn by the request of the Air Pollution Control Officer. With that, I would ask those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Those members who are present in the conference room now who wish on providing testimony to the board on the withdrawal of this item may come forward to the podium. Chair Shu, seeing no members of the public wishing to provide public comment on this item. Public comment session.
I guess we can close public comments. If there aren't any questions, I can move on to E3. So E3 is fiscal year 2023-24 mid-year budget updates, and note for the record, this item is informational and won't require any board action. So I ask the clerk to provide public testimony instructions.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I would ask members of the public that are requested to speak on this item here in the conference room to please approach the podium at this time. Those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now.
Thank you. And for the staff presentation, we'll be with Deputy Director Michael Watt, Chief of Departmental Administration Services, Stephanie Nicholas. So you guys have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Shu and board members. My name is Stephanie Nicholas, Chief of Business Support Services. Today's presentation is an informational item to provide an update on the district's financial status and mid-year budget performance. As part of our ongoing efforts to increase transparency into our budget, we plan on providing updates like this to the board more frequently throughout the year, in addition to the annual budget recommendation and adoption hearings. Next slide, please. During today's presentation, the items being covered will include a reminder of the approved budget, an overview of the mid-year budget projections, both risks and opportunities to the district that could impact these projections for the remainder of the year, an update on some of our accomplishments so far this fiscal year, and finally, the next steps in the budget process. Next slide, please. As part of the approved budget, we laid out 5 foundational goals to provide a roadmap for our work for the fiscal year. These goals and objectives were informed by ongoing policy direction from the governing board, staff input, and existing and expanded program requirements. The approved budget reflected the district's ongoing commitment to its goals of promoting air quality, public health, environmental justice and equity, public engagement and transparency, and operational excellence. Next slide, please. To revisit what was approved by this board in June of 2023, a fiscal year 23-24 $116 million budget was approved by the board to advance the district's vision of clean air for all and mission to improve air quality to protect public health and the environment. The $116 million approved budget included an operating budget of $38.9 million and $77.1 million in special revenue fund expenses, including pass-through grants, community air protection program funding for SERP implementation and incentives in under-resourced communities, and air quality improvement trust or DMV revenue to fund programs that reduce motor vehicle emissions and programs that help to meet the mandated state and federal air quality requirements. The approved budget also included 2 new positions for a total of 177 full-time equivalent staff at APCD. And with minor adjustments to the approved budget, which we've made to account for encumbrances to pay for projects such as fleet and electric vehicle charging stations that were in place prior to the start of the fiscal year 23-24 budget, but were not spent, so those were carried forward as part of the current budget to pay for those projects. Next slide, please. The operating budget is broken down into 3 major categories. We have salaries and benefits, or S&B, which is the cost to pay all staff salaries, including negotiated labor agreement increases, benefits, including health insurance, retirement, workers' comp, things like that. Then we have services and supplies, or S&S, which are the costs the district is responsible outside of salary and benefits. These include things like fleet, IT, building maintenance, office equipment, and supplies, to name a few. And then lastly, we have capital asset equipment, which covers the cost to purchase tangible assets used in operations that will benefit more than one fiscal year. And these are things like monitoring equipment. In the graph shown on this slide, the first row of data, the dark green row, represents the total amount of adjusted budget approved for each category. The second row, or the orange colored bar, is the amount the district is projected to spend based on spending through December 31, 2023. And the third row, the lighter green shaded color, is the actual amount spent through December 31, 2023. We are projecting to spend 27.7 million of the 27.9 million in S&B that was approved remaining on budget. Having said that, as a reminder, for our salary and benefit costs, we projected a 10% vacancy rate for the organization as part of the budget. However, we are trending towards a lower vacancy rate, which could impact our S&B spending for the remainder of the year. So we are monitoring that closely each month. We are projecting to spend 7.8 million of the 9.3 million approved for S&S for a projected savings of 1.5 million. And we are projecting to spend 1.6 million of the 2.2 million approved for capital assets for a savings of 0.6 million. Although on paper, this is savings, this funding has been earmarked for the replacement of some of our gas-powered fleet vehicles with electric vehicles and for the installation of new EV charging infrastructure. But due to some delays in manufacturing, these efforts are taking longer than anticipated, so we'll need to carry this funding forward into next fiscal year to ensure that we can complete these projects. In summary, of the $39.4 million adjusted operating expenses, we are projecting to spend $37.1 million this fiscal year. Next slide, please. This slide shows the operating budget revenue projections for the fiscal year. Our approved budget had $35.4 million in total revenues, and our projections based on fees paid and revenue received through December 31, 2023 are $35.4 million. So right on track with what was budgeted. There are several revenue categories included in this chart and in the approved budget, such as charges for current services, which is for the most part our asbestos fees, license permits and franchises, which is again, for the most part, new applications, our time and materials, and our renewal inspections. So mostly cost recovery fees in those, or cost recovery items in those categories, but not all. We also have fines, forfeitures, and penalties, which includes notices of violation. We have intergovernmental revenue, meaning revenue we receive from other government agencies associated with grants, and then other financing sources, which includes revenue such as DMV revenue, and then the grant revenue specifically allowable to cover administrative costs for the district. For our charges for current services and license permit and franchises, which is mostly cost recovery or fee for service revenue, we budgeted approximately 11.8 million, and we are projecting to collect approximately 12.9 million in revenue. This demonstrates that our cost recovery efforts are working and projections are aligning with our cost recovery projections. The increase of 1.1 million in the fee-for-service revenue is offset by a projected $1.2 million reduction in intergovernmental revenue, mainly related to reductions in Diesel Emission Reduction Act revenue, and also a small reduction in other financing sources related to our DMV revenues. We always have to be careful with revenue since it is not a straight line projection, and there are many factors that go into this that could fluctuate the revenue that are beyond our control. So we will continue to monitor the revenue closely and monitor any changes and the effects they have on our overall budget. Next slide, please. As part of the approved 23-24 budget, the board approved the usage of 3.4 million in operations fund balance to cover revenue gaps in mandated programs where we don't currently have revenue sources. However, based on projected expenditure savings of 1.5 million and 0.2 million of salary and benefit cost savings that I talked about earlier, it's projected that we will only need to draw down the operations general fund by 1.7 million this year. This is good news, and that we're projecting to only use roughly half of what we thought was needed, slowing the drawdown of our operations general fund. We remain on track to put $650,000 into our committed operating reserve to help us achieve the board direction of having 2 months operating reserves available. And again, remain on track with putting $250,000 into the committed fund for financial systems as approved by the board in June. Next slide, please. As noted, these projections are based on actual spending through December 31, 2023. And although we do not project major changes, there are things that could and may come up that we cannot anticipate that could affect these projections. As an example, in December and January, we had some unanticipated facilities issues that we had to address, which could reduce the expenditure savings we estimated due to unanticipated costs associated with resolving those issues. There continues to also be delays in manufacturing and supply chain, which could continue to affect the purchase of equipment and our replacement of fleet vehicles. We've also experienced some delays in our monitoring station remodel, and due to those delays, we know that we will not spend all of our funding on the replacement of the Chula Vista monitoring station, so we'll need to carry that funding forward into next year as well to make sure that we complete that project. Another risk is our BioWatch program. There's still a chance that funding will not be reauthorized by the federal government, so we have funding currently for the program through June 1 of this calendar year. But the program is currently only authorized until mid-March. So over the next several weeks, we'll be watching that closely. And then we have our state funding. As the state continues to face some financial struggles, this could affect the payout of some of our grants. We're working to request prepayments from the state for those grants that could be impacted by these struggles to reduce the chances of negatively impacting our programs and services. And then we've also worked hard, since the district is staffed by county employees, we also need to factor in possible changes to salary and benefits negotiated by the county that we have little to no control over. These include across the board cost of living and equity increases and one-time payouts to help offset employee costs for things like healthcare. The current labor agreement is set to expire at the end of next fiscal year, so there is some uncertainty on what our future S&B costs will be until a new agreement is reached. In terms of opportunities, we've worked hard to identify new funding opportunities this fiscal year to advance our vision and mission, including being awarded a $1 million environmental justice government-to-government grant to support activities that lead to measurable environmental or public health impacts in communities disproportionately burdened by environmental harms. We continue to look for additional grants. We've applied for a grant to help offset some of our upcoming costs associated with installing EV infrastructure at our offices, so we're waiting for results of that grant. We're also seeing our actual revenues aligning with approved budget projections, demonstrating that our cost recovery efforts are working, so we are continuing to move forward with that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we had some objectives and goals laid out in our budget, and we've made some large strides in achieving and advancing those goals and objectives to enhance the quality of life and achieve clean air for all. Some of those accomplishments include continuing our work to incorporate environmental justice principles and practices into everything that we do, the development of a community emission reduction plan for the international border community, expansion of regional and community monitoring, including new sensors at the Tijuana River Valley. We have assisted with funding to bring groundbreaking zero-emission projects to the region, including the nation's first electric tugboat and first all-electric dual mobile harbor cranes. As part of the Portside Air Quality Improvement Relief, or PAIR program, we've assisted with the distribution of nearly 600 air monitors and just under 600 air purifiers in the Portside communities. We have implemented an air quality complaint mapping tool to allow for transparency into our complaints. We have funded our after-hours complaint program, so inspectors are available 24/7 to investigate air quality concerns with a response time of less than 24 hours. And we have ongoing implementation of board-adopted requirements aimed at reducing potential health risks from cancer by tenfold, which since 2021 have helped to protect over 1,600 residents, nearly 60 businesses, and the visitors to one neighborhood park from elevated health risks, including the hidden danger of cancer and other adverse health effects. We will continue to strive towards achieving new goals within the current and future budgets. Next slide, please. So the information I just discussed was about where we are at in regard to our financial status and mid-year budget performance for the current year. We do intend to come back later in the calendar year to give you a final update on the fiscal year 23-24 budget compared to what was approved once the 23-24 books close. But we also wanted, as part of this presentation, to take a moment to set the stage for key budget dates associated with the upcoming year's budget. On February 8th of this year, we held a public workshop with our strategic plan team and engaged community members and stakeholders, asking for feedback on how they would like to see us spend discretionary funds moving forward in both the upcoming and future budget years. And as part of the proposed 24-25 budget, that will be released to the public on our website on April 9th. And then on May 9th, we will present the recommended budget to this governing board. And then on June 13th, budget deliberations by the governing board will take place. Throughout the entire process, we will continue to engage stakeholders, gather feedback, and we will send out notices to all stakeholders signed up through our electronic notification system and disseminate the information via social media. Next slide, please. That concludes this presentation. We are available for questions.
Thank you. Yeah, do we have any public comments? I understand.
Excuse me, Chair Shu, we have received no members of the public requesting to speak on this.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from my colleagues? Supervisor Martins.
Thank you. I appreciate all of the work on this. I just have a quick question, and I think mostly because I want to figure out if I can bring it up in the strategic planning process. So I don't know if there's limitations on the, when you talked about one of the last slides on the air monitoring, right, the purifiers, the program that we have, and it's specific to the Portside community. So I just want to make sure, are there parameters to the air monitoring purifiers and where they could be?
Under the current program, it's limited to the Portside community, but there are efforts underway to expand that both to the international border community as well as possibly other disadvantaged communities throughout the county. So that's something we're gonna be working on over the course of the next couple of years.
I want to partner with you on that, particularly for Nestor and Peel Beach. And I know that we've been doing the work on the Tijuana side, and then we're still expanding. But it's really important to me. I'm trying to figure out if I can also advocate for it in the budget, on the county-wide budget. I know that we have a $76 million budget deficit in the state of California, and then trying to figure out if there's maybe money from CARB as well that we can. So I need your help in helping me think about this and how we bring additional monitors into the community, particularly to address the conversation that we had, I think it was in January, around some of the suggested repercussions as it relates to the Tijuana River Valley. And, I just our epidemiologists were on the phone last time around, and happy to have them come back because they actually have really good news that on the fact that we have actual data that demonstrates that yes, it's absolutely an issue, but it's not impacting people in the GI. And so I think it's important for that information to come back maybe in the April meeting so that our epidemiology folks can give an update to the air pollution control district. I've shared it with Mayor and some other folks in Peel Beach, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with the work that the county is doing related to that. And so I think I say all that because I want to connect it to figuring out if we should still have the air monitors as we're moving forward to capture any data that would be important for us. So as you're thinking about strategic planning, I think that's where I would like to be able to work on it with you. Thank you.
Member Gomez.
Question for, and I appreciate the report. It's really helpful. That's where I'm gonna be entering into strategic planning and the next budget. So this is very helpful, the process. The question that I have is related to some of the implementation that looks like, because of issues that are not under our control, such as device creation of devices and whatnot. If they're gonna roll over, are there any impacts to the implementation that is funding those projects? I mean, I don't know if those projects are getting funded by state or other monies.
Like deadlines to spend that money
Yeah.
that might, I'm not aware of any.
I don't know of any off the top of my head. I mean, the ones that we've talked about related to our vehicle infrastructures, of that nature, there's nothing there. Some of the grant program, like the DERA program was one of them where basically the way that program works, we have to get invoices from the entity that received that funding before we can, receive that revenue. And so there's a little bit of a delay there. One of those is that ETUG project. I don't know from the monitoring side, I'm looking at Domingo, maybe he can help, but there's nothing on the monitoring money that we're carrying over that has expenditure deadlines. So at this point in time, I don't think there's a big risk there, but that is something for us to keep an eye on, because depending on which, cycle of funding we're looking at, they do have liquidation and expenditure deadlines. The good news is when it comes to the, grant funding that we get for pass-through projects, we can oftentimes kind of mix and match. So for example, if a project that gets funded out of year 2 gets done early, we can, move that money around and use the year 1 money to show that it's been fully expended, and then bump that back for year 2 projects. So there's an opportunity for a lot of these to move things around a little bit so we don't find ourselves in those liquidation issues.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Gloria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarifying question on the risk slide. You mentioned labor negotiations. And then mentioned a series of potential adjustments or whatever. Are those already in our labor contracts, or are you currently at the table negotiating?
So the county has, up to now, the county employees are on contract through the end of fiscal year 24-25. They're going to be starting a new labor contract negotiation process in the fall, as I understand it. And so during the last round of negotiations, we were not involved because the county handles that on our behalf. And so at this time, we're not aware of what those costs might look like. And so that's why we listed here something that we need to adjust to. There are also occasional one-time payments that are approved for county employees. So those are other instances in which we need to adjust to be able to accommodate this. So those are approved by the County Board of Supervisors, but we find room in the budget for them.
I'm tracking you now. It's a unique situation.
It's a unique situation because of the hybrid nature of our agency and because we're all still county employees and subject to the labor negotiations that the county undertakes.
But it's all of our employees are a part of a larger bargaining unit. We're not our own bargaining unit.
Correct.
Understood.
That's correct.
Okay. I guess the value of having this kind of updates. So thank you for sharing.
The other hands up, if not, I have a quick question with regards to reserves. And if you go back to that slide that showed funding for the reserves for now and in the future. And so I understand we're going to be able to maintain the minimum level is a 2-month operating fund, but you also gave some figures in terms of how much we're drawing from it and how much we're putting in. And we're concerned that we're actually drawing from it and putting in less. Can you elaborate on that and how that is fitting in our safety margin?
I think maybe I'll make sure I understand the question. There's money that we're drawing out as a whole to help cover revenue shortcomings. We had budgeted for 2.4 million. We're projecting to only need to draw half of that. That includes the funding that we're going to put in our kind of different flavor of savings accounts. So I don't remember what the dollar amount was, Stephanie, $650,000 into our reserve fund and then $250,000 into our financial system reserve fund. So that money is still going into the savings bucket, just in different committed accounts. I'm not sure if that helps or if that gets to the question.
If I could try and clarify, I think the key takeaway from this slide is that we're needing to dip into that fund balance less than what we thought we would have to. And so, like Mike said, we're still continuing to move fund balance from kind of general operations fund balance into these specified accounts that the board has approved. So one of those, if you'll recall, is for our fiscal system. So at some point, we may need to procure our own fiscal system, and that's not inexpensive, to put it mildly. So I believe that was 250,000 that was approved to go into that account. So that's included in what we're still projecting to draw from fund balance, but it's going from one fund balance to another one. It's still going to end up in the bottom line fund balance, if that helps.
Yeah, that clarifies for you what's happening there. Thank you very much. Any other comments? If not, we can move on to the next item.
Sure.
Yes.
Just a quick question. What is VitalWatch?
BioWatch is a program that we are funded to conduct through the Department of Homeland Security. And it involves monitors for biohazards at different locations in San Diego. And so, as was mentioned, it's approved by the federal government. And so we're waiting on the reauthorization of that program. So we don't anticipate problems, but just given how Washington has been recently, it's more of the logistical delay than a policy concern from, as we understand it.
Is that the one that Dr. Silverman said he couldn't tell us anything about?
I think I told you all that we can say in public.
Great, seeing no other requests for discussion, that was an informational item. We'll move on to E for strategic planning process updates and planning sessions. So for this item is also for information only and will not require any board action. So clerk, do we have any public, who can give us instructions for public testimony?
Thank you, Chair Shu. Those members of the public that are joining us via the teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raised hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of staff presentations.
Great, for this presentation, we have our pollution control officer for this and our program coordinator Monique Lopez, both of who and other staff have fully worked hard in this. So thank you for bringing this forward to us now.
Thank you, Chair Shu and board members. So this item today is a mini workshop to continue development of our long-term strategic plan. We've been in the process of developing the plan for almost 2 years now, and today marks the culmination of the engagement phase of the project. I'm joined today by Monique Lopez, our program coordinator in the Office of Environmental Justice, who's been instrumental in designing and implementing this phase of the plan development. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start with a brief overview of the workshop we'll be conducting today. First, we will revisit the strategic plan framework and timeline that was approved by this board last October. Next, we will provide some context and grounding for our discussion with a very brief overview of the current APCD programs and approved priorities adopted by your board. Then Monique will review the robust public engagement process that we've undertaken over the last several months, as well as the themes that have surfaced in that outreach, highlighting those that were elevated by the Planning and Policy Committee when we met with them on this last month. After an opportunity for public comment on the staff presentation, Monique will guide the board's discussion of your priorities, as well as a discussion of potential resource routes we may pursue to achieve those priorities. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the timeline for our strategic plan process and where we are in that process. As I mentioned previously, this meeting marks the culmination of our continued engagement phase. The full framework included in your board package shows the detail of the actions that we have taken so far. We are still on track to bring the plan back to your board in September of this year. Next slide, please. As you'll recall, our strategic plan will help define the direction APCD will take in the next 3 to 5 years. It will include our vision and mission statements, goals, and the actions we will take to achieve those goals. The strategic plan will help continue the new direction for APCD and will help establish priorities for future actions and the allocation of resources. Next slide, please. By now, you're very familiar with our vision and mission. I start here because, as I mentioned, our vision and mission will provide the foundation for our strategic plan. Next slide, please. Building upon our vision and mission are the goals and objectives that were originally adopted by this board with our budget for the fiscal year 22-23 budget year and have been carried over since. Again, these will form the foundation for the priorities and actions in our plan. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of our programs and commitments as context for the discussion of board priorities that will follow. This slide represents our key program areas for our core programs. With 177 full-time equivalent positions, it's hard to discuss all of our work in just a couple of minutes. So this is a very high-level summary of our major divisions. All of these divisions work together to do the following. We monitor and record air quality using a network of equipment stationed around the county and alert the public to the air quality conditions. Air samples are also tested in the field and labs, including our own. We focus additional engagement and resources in those communities most impacted by air pollution and work to ensure environmental justice and equity are incorporated into everything we do. We also ensure commercial and industrial businesses are permitted and complied with air pollution control laws and reduce emissions of toxic air contaminants as required by our air toxics hotspots program. Next, our compliance division field staff inspect both permitted and non-permitted sources of air contaminants and investigate public complaints of air quality matters. And finally, for those sources we don't directly regulate, we incentivize cleaner than required technologies offered by grant funds. We also work to help future generations have clean air through long-term regional plans to reduce unhealthful pollution levels and develop air quality rules. This program will likely be expanding due to the revised standard for fine particulate matter recently adopted by US EPA. And again, we have staff that support all of these important services by making sure that we have the resources and equipment we need to get the work done. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the current APCD priorities that go beyond these core functions. Some of these were identified by AB 423, such as our work on reducing indirect source emissions and our annual air quality report. Others, such as the public participation plan, were identified by the state audit that was conducted of our operations and concluded in 2021. And many have been identified through actions taken by this governing board, such as our environmental justice framework, our public participation plan, the equity statement, our language access policy. These policies and priorities will thus be reflected in the strategic plan as it is developed. With that, I will turn it over to Monique to discuss the public engagement we've conducted and the themes that have surfaced in this process. Monique?
Thank you, Paula. Good afternoon, Chairperson Shu and members of the board. Today I'll be sharing in detail what engagement our team has conducted to help inform the strategic plan, what key themes emerged as a result of that feedback, and the priorities that have been identified by the APCD Planning and Policy Committee. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides will show who we engaged and how we engaged these stakeholders. As you can see, we engaged a diverse group of stakeholders in the strategic planning process since last October. This includes APCD board members through one-on-one interviews and written feedback. Okay, I apologize. Go to the next slide, please. Oh, you got the wrong slide deck? Okay, we'll take a little pause as we get the right slide deck up. No worries. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maria, I just texted you. You got it? Yeah. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. All right, thank you. Thanks for catching that, Mike. So in the next couple of slides, for reals this time, we'll show you who we engaged and how we engaged these stakeholders. As mentioned, we engaged a diverse group of stakeholders in the strategic planning process since last October. And this includes APCD board members through one-on-one interviews and written feedback, the general public through virtual meetings and online feedback, government agencies through a survey and one-on-one interviews, industry through the AIWG meeting and small group conversations, APCD staff through in-person workshops, online feedback, and one-on-one interviews. That's not all. Next slide, please. We also engaged environmental justice community through virtual and in-person sessions held in English, Spanish, and Arabic in partnership with community-based organizations region-wide. We also engaged a diverse group of community-based organizations in relationship with communities that are facing the greatest environmental burdens. And lastly, we also conducted an in-person workshops with both the Portside and International Border Community Air Protection Program steering committees. So you can see we've been able to engage since October a pretty diverse group of folks. Next slide, please. All right. So the next 5 slides will highlight the key themes that were identified by stakeholders. In many cases, each of these themes were identified by more than one stakeholder and were thus combined to make one theme. These themes are organized with APCD's goals and objectives categories. So you'll find all of these familiar, such as air quality, public health, environmental justice and equity, engagement and transparency, and operational excellence. Additionally, the asterisk at the end of some of these themes indicate the priorities that the APCD Planning and Policy Committee identified. For the sake of time, I won't go into detail over every single one of these themes, but we'll highlight themes in more detail that were supported most frequently by a wide variety of stakeholders. The full description of each theme is in the document in front of you that looks like this. And for those that are in the room, if you'd like to follow along as well, we do have some extra copies up here at this table. And for those of you that are joining us virtually, you'll also find that in our board packet as well. So please use this document as I go through the next few slides to begin to identify what are your top 3 priorities. Feel free to mark up the page as you identify your top 3 priorities. And after public comment, each of you will have an opportunity to share these priorities. For the first category, air quality, the following themes rose to the top. First, emission reduction and air quality enhancement. In more detail means commitment to reducing emissions, improving air quality and public health outcomes by implementing projects, developing or updating rules, and increasing inspections to address pollution, particularly in hotspots, border region, and communities of concern. The second one that rose to the top in this category is increased community monitoring and data access. So this includes increasing monitoring across San Diego County and share data from both sides of the border, particularly prioritizing environmental justice communities. Next slide, please. Next is the public health category. And the 2 that rose to the top there include APCD's role in environmental justice and public health, which is really about the recognition that APCD plays a pivotal role in addressing environmental justice concerns, promoting public health, and the importance of transparency in its mission. Secondly, which we heard earlier today, is expanding the availability of air filtration system, such as the PAIR program, in homes, public buildings, schools, particularly in communities that are most overburdened. Next slide, please. Third, we have environmental justice and equity. And many stakeholders supported equitable access and prioritization, which means a commitment to ensuring equitable access to clean air as a universal right, with a focus on prioritizing resources to improve air quality of those most impacted, all the while still being able to anticipate and address long-term challenges. The second one in this category is integrating the environmental justice framework and approach in all APCD's divisions operations by ensuring that guidelines, practices, budgets, and timelines support its integration. Next slide, please. For engagement and transparency, the most popular themes included: first, conduct public education and outreach. And this one is quite full. So it's about developing materials and conducting outreach to make APCD a household name and have the public become aware of air quality issues and the impacts of air pollution on public health. Additionally, serves as a trusted source to the community in accessing information, resources, and services for air quality and public health concerns that may not be directly connected to APCD's jurisdiction. This could include information about asthma prevention, secondhand exposure, smoke exposure in multifamily housing, and the like. The second element that rose to the top for this category is around increasing governmental engagement and collaboration. This includes greater participation and collaboration with federal, state, regional, county, city, binational, and one that was highlighted a bit was around developing government-to-government relationships with tribal nations. Doing so, APCD can leverage resources, relationships, grant opportunities, community outreach, and advance similar goals and influence policies and plans to improve air quality and public health outcomes. Next slide, please. Lastly, in terms of operational excellence, many stakeholders agree on the following two key points. First is around budget and resources. So leverage state and federal funding opportunities to increase budget for resources and hiring of new staff to improve services and efficiencies in order to successfully implement agency requirements, advance clean air and climate goals, and advance APCD's goals and priorities. And lastly, streamlining operations and services. So facilitate improved communication channels, increase transparency, and optimize permit application, emission inventory, and invoice procedures using new technologies such as AI and others, and updating operational systems. Next slide, please. Right. So this slide highlights in one place the overall themes by category prioritized by the APCD Planning and Policy Committee. As you may have noticed throughout the presentation, many of the themes identified by stakeholders are reflective of APCD policies and priorities that have been adopted by or provided direction by the board over the past couple of years. This demonstrates to APCD that the board has been actively responsive on many of the elements stakeholders have shared. Next slide, please. As folks are sharing their thoughts through public testimony, this might also help shape your prioritization as well. After public comment, you will have an opportunity to engage in a discussion and continue to prioritize key things. I'll now pass it back to Chairperson Shu to open the conversation up to public comment.
Thank you, Monique. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair Shu. We have received one public comment on this item. I would ask Nicholas Paul to please approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to provide your comment. Please self-regulate your time.
Okay. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me okay? Nicholas with the Environmental Health Coalition. Before kind of getting into my comment about the strategic planning process, I want to congratulate Member Medina and Rebecca Garcia, their appointments to the Policy and Planning Commission or Committee. I think we're looking forward to working with you guys on some key policies in this upcoming year, including passing an ISR that's meaningful for our disadvantaged communities, as well as passing Port MOU that results in some reductions in pollution in the port site. So looking forward to that. I wanted to make a quick comment, and it's equally relevant to the budget conversation earlier. We wanted to make a quick comment to encourage APCD to continue to invest resources in our disadvantaged communities. Briefly, last year EHC was working on promoting the ZEV truck pilot program, which, as you all know, is this incredible incentive program that businesses in the port side acquire ZEV trucks, and it would pay up to 90% of the upfront cost of that program. And it doesn't even require scrappage for trucks. And so this was a really valuable tool for community-based organizations to try to get businesses to jump into the transition. As we engage with small businesses, though, operating next door to senior housing complexes and parks in the neighborhood, one of the immediate pushbacks that we got was, hey, we don't have charging for these trucks. This is a great idea, but we don't have charging for these trucks. I say this recognizing, though, that things are quickly changing. And so just a couple of days ago, the commissioners of the Port of San Diego approved a proposal for a charging station in West National City that's anticipated to be open to the public by 2025. This facility will host 70 charging ports and provide much needed charging infrastructure in National City. We still need public facing charging in Barrio Logan, though. And so it's critical, APCD, to continue to invest in neighborhoods like Barrio Logan, to install charging infrastructure in the neighborhood, and continue to push programs like the ZEV Truck Pilot Program to encourage small businesses in the neighborhood to use that charging infrastructure. And so again, this comment is just to emphasize that please continue to stay course and continue to invest as much funds as possible in our disadvantaged communities so that we can electrify and clean up here neighborhoods. Thank you.
Chair Shu, seeing no additional hands raised and no members of the public present in today's conference room and wishing to address the board on this item, that concludes today's public comment.
Thank you for the presentation and public comments. We'll have some discussion here by our board. And I don't know if Monique, you have a process for that.
I do. Thank you so much, Chairperson Shu. Next slide, please. We have 3 prompts that we'd like to, actually leave it on that slide instead. We have 3 prompts we'd like you all to engage in a facilitated discussion. In terms of process and logistics, it's going to look a little bit different. So I will be facilitating the guided discussion and we'll be calling on people as I self-select to share. But before we get into the facilitated discussion and begin asking you all questions, we wanted to pause for a moment and see if you all had any questions or reflections that you'd like to share regarding the presentation. All right. We're making my job easy. All right. So the following prompt process will help inform staff which themes to perhaps phase in sooner, prioritize resources, and the like. So next slide, please. Of the themes that were identified, in your perspective and what you know of the community and your time here on the board, what should be APCD's top 3 priorities? And of course, this would not preclude any of the other themes identified, but in your perspective, what should be APCD's top 3 priorities? And also, is there anything missing as well?
Member Bush.
Yeah, so I think this was pretty extensive. I didn't see anything missing. For me, I think the top 3 priorities, I think you had, the air quality, public health, and environmental justice and equity. I think that's for me, that's what sticks out the most. I'm kind of going back and forth on this in my head, and I spoke to our executive director officer, Ms. Forbes, about and staff about this, sometimes I think that, I wonder if public health should be the top one because I think we should, as an organization, do better about the narrative on how pollution kills, how we are protecting public health, because sometimes I think we get so caught up in the technical details about emissions and the data, and it's really hard to understand and decipher for the public. I mean, it's hard for me sometimes, right? And I think that the messaging and the narrative is important, and ultimately we're doing this for health, like that's one of the priorities. So and I have had a few conversations with member Brett Garcia about this, and I really appreciate her perspective. I actually think she's one of the most effective in a way and powerful, if you will, of our members. We're all, we're all awesome. So, but what I'm saying, her perspective is unique in that she's a pediatrician and she deals with these issues. And so when she speaks, with such authority about the health impacts and the kids that she sees and the asthma, it makes it more real. And I get the chills sometimes just talking to her because so it takes it away from this nebulous, this of air quality, this technicality and the science, and it makes it more human and health. And there's just something more, I don't know, emotional, and there's a love, if you will, to it. So yeah, that's so sometimes I wonder, it makes sense why air quality, that absolutely makes 100% sense why that should be number one. But sometimes I wonder if maybe the public health aspect of it, the narrative that all of us, maybe there's something more and different that we could do there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Any other comments? To me, one of the themes that comes to the top is the education of public relations and image. I think thanks to legislation, we actually changed who APCD is, thanks to the work of the policy and strategy planning subcommittee. The organization has changed a lot, I think, to be much more responsive to communities and to begin engaged in this strategic planning process now. But I think much of the community, they need to start learning of who the new APCD is and what we're going to try to achieve in our region. It's a long process, but I think that's one of the next steps. And I think the message of public health, as introduced by Member Bush, is really a good one to lead us off into. So to me, that's the broader strategic planning process that the organization needs to now work on. That's going to take some time, but I think we should be looking at more public engagement, whether it's a special event, whether it's appearing at various places at various times, whether it's board members or staff members. All of that is going to be, I think, important as we move forward. And sometimes I think APCD may not be in complete agreement with some of the other public agencies in our region, which I think it's appropriate. We have a specific interest dealing with health, clean air, which should be a priority or is a priority, and it's okay for us to stand out and be there. And I actually I'm going to reserve some other comments for later, but I think with this prompt, that'll be my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to chime in, we want to provide some feedback. I took for granted the fact that we would do air quality, public health, and environmental justice, and I assume that's why we're here, right? So how we go about doing that was how I approached these prompts. And so maybe not surprising coming from me, organizational independence becomes a priority, as well as being an ally to the affected communities. But I think that lack of independence in the past has been obvious. And then to comments of my colleagues that are here, we need public engagement. I recognize that this is a very important organization, as evidenced by the $100+ million budget that you're talking about, whether or not affected communities understand the resources of this charge is here. I'm not so sure that's currently here, and for relatively new, it's more independent organization, it's probably time well spent. Those are my reactions to it.
Thank you so much.
Member Gomez.
Yeah, definitely echo everything that has been said by my colleagues. I would only add one thing, and that is in relation to air quality threshold goals. What I know that there's a threshold at the state level, right? But how are we regionally gonna get there, right? What's the plan? How are we measuring ourselves? So I think that's really important.
Georgia stole my thunder. No, I think that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. And so, I really appreciate Member Bush's connecting air quality to health. However, that's very complicated. And so we need to push for public engagement and education and help people understand the connection between the two. But the metric that we use is air quality. And so, yes, having, what are those thresholds? What do the numbers mean? Having better data and then being able to connect it to correlate it, because we may not never be able to have a causation argument, but at least a correlation argument with the metrics that we use. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. If okay, we can go to the next slide, please. So, and you may have shared this already, but what is one thing that excites you most? And maybe what's one thing that you think may be most challenging to implement and why? But it still might excite you.
I'm gonna try to continue the discussion that Member Gomez and Medina brought up, but I'll give you a little story first. So my first dealings with the San Diego Air Pollution Control District was when I was the park superintendent, and I was overseeing a prescribed burning program. So in prescribed burning in the state park system, we light areas of the forest literally on fire, but it has to meet a particular prescription. That's why it's prescribed burn, not control burn. So it takes a lot of work to us to devise what time of year, particular week or two, make everything safe, bring in employees from other parts of the state to make that happen. So it takes a lot of work and time, but there's one element that we couldn't control. That's our phone call to the Air Pollution Control District of San Diego to ask whether or not we can burn that day. And there are times in which we spend a lot of time, energy, and planning and money only for the Air Pollution Control District to say, you can't burn. The conditions are not right. We're worried that the smoke from the fire is going to somehow affect the community nearby. Shut the program down. That happened many times. And to me, it's pretty ironic because we know the forest will burn at some point. But we're controlling the burn because of the conditions in our region. It's also very ironic because I know that smoke was going to happen one day or another in a major fire. We need to have that kind of process, particularly in those communities that are affected the most by pollution, not by fire per se, but by our own transportation system and other industries that we have in our community, particularly when it's so bad. One other piece of information that I'll share with you is that recently at a California State Transportation Commission meeting, I heard a new report after years of data collecting of recent air pollution control issues and equity. The finding was that air pollution in the state has gone down, which is good, overall. However, the disparity between poor and rich, communities of color, and other communities, communities that we know, like how town environmental screening and their mapping, the disparity between those two has remained the same. So yes, we have done a better job cleaning the air, but we really haven't addressed the equity issue. We really haven't addressed those who are still getting sick the most. And so to me, that draws attention to us to really focus in on that. So what I look forward to is for us to be able to monitor, to have a threshold, and to act on that threshold with a menu of things that we can do. And some of that is going to have to affect whether through incentives or through a cost system to reduce pollution, particularly when we know that 24% is bad. So EPA did not give us a 24-hour threshold on NOx and ozone, but I think there's no reason why we can't in our region, and then to respond to that. This is not unlike other air pollution control districts, neighboring ones. They also do that kind of and have provisions to reduce pollution when it's particularly bad, and when they can predict that. So we can move along those lines. That's going to take a lot of all three prongs, even the third prong, in terms of information and concern. But it is, I think, in my mind, what our strategy should be aiming towards is to narrow the gap. Reduce the air pollution overall, but also narrow the disparities between those who have relatively clean air and those who do not. So that's a huge, I think, task, but should be primary in our strategy. Otherwise, when we speak of equity, we're going to just speak of it, but not have a goal of actually narrowing the gap. Member Gomez.
Thank you. So for me, what excites me is the possibility of advancing environmental justice. Right. But to me, the challenge is the how, right? And I think that's where we really need to be very, very intentional. And just to uplift the public comment, I think it really does come down to what resources are we putting into the how. Beyond PAIR is great and it's popular and we want to advance it. What other components are we doing to really get there? And what are those components that are benefiting residents? I get that we need to encourage and have a carrot for industry, but for the actual people that are getting impacted, that are breathing day in, day out, what are we bringing to them beyond PAIR? So I just think that is really critical. Thank you.
Member Bush.
Yeah, on what excites me the most, I'm looking at in a way it's the building and also this is, I think, challenging too, the building relationships. And I love on here that it's the environmental justice community, industry, regional partners, trust, transparency, because all of that is important. All of that goes with communication and kind of our outreach. My only, when I thought of, when I was looking at this, the positive part of it, there's this thing called toxic positivity, right? When we're just positive for the sake of being positive and not wanting to get into conflicts. And Chair Shu brought this up earlier. So when we're working with these different agencies, industries, there are going to be conflicts, or even with the residents for that matter. And so it's really important that we have that communication and that we're upfront and we have the difficult, uncomfortable conversations. I think too often we avoid the conflict, and the ones who lose out the most are those that don't have the resources, the capacity to be here and be at the table for those discussions in every moment. And I just thought maybe what might be missing in all this is ultimately it's behavior change. So maybe that is something in this that's, I don't know that you guys we necessarily have to add that in, but I think actually that's probably the most challenging part of everything is how are we, each as individuals, changing our behaviors for air quality. For example, we know to Member Shu's point that of all these emission issues and air quality issues that result in all public health challenges, that it's driving its cars, its vehicle emissions. But our behavior, and I drove over here, so I'm part of the problem too. So it's changing that behavior and having those uncomfortable, conversations, and how do we shift to improving transit, biking and walking? So that's behaviors. That's not on here, but that's probably the most challenging part. But I guess maybe that's part of the relationships. Like I think a healthy relationship is having honest communications and not being afraid to upset a particular agency because they might retaliate against us, or we might make them angry.
Thank you.
To me, the same one that excites me the most, the one that I find most challenging, and that is multi-jurisdictional policy. We're a great board in that we represent by proxy, if not in person, every city in the county. And as we have heard, many of the issues that we don't regulate are regulated by these other entities. And so the opportunity to use this board as a platform for changing policy throughout the county in the cities where their jurisdiction is what is at issue, I find very exciting. And it will be very challenging because of the different priorities. But I think that's a great opportunity that we have that we should not miss.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Either one of us.
Just try to be contributors for, listen, we have a mission, this is a clean air, right? And so that work, is the center of what we do. How we go about doing it, I think, is some of the nature of this question. I just, maybe to some of the broader, more macro level comments that I made here, changing human behavior is very difficult. And that's going to be a significant challenge to implement what we do. But I hope that this organization is focused on doing what we're here to do, which is to make sure that more people have access to clean air, recognizing the historic disparities that exist. And maybe that's one of the exciting things as well, to address it in a more targeted fashion in order to get more relief for those who have not historically received it. But overall, let's be clear about what we're here to do, and to continue the progress towards cleaning our air. But obviously, as the low-hanging fruit has probably been addressed, now we're talking about more significant stuff that is more impactful to certain industries, more requiring of individual behavior, which I don't think this organization, beyond maybe some lawnmowers or something that had to do in the past, and it's going to be a lot more difficult.
And so we should probably move to prompt 3 as well.
Let's go to prompt number 3. Next slide, please. There we go. So given all the themes listed and the priorities that you all have identified, what resource routes can help support the strategic plan successful implementation? So in the next slide, I'll review some potential resource routes that APCD staff has identified, and then I'll provide greater direction. Next slide, please. So here are some resource routes that APCD staff identified. So one would be phasing. So where implementation doesn't necessarily happen all at once, but over the course of years, updating fees to reflect true costs, seeking CARB funding for the mobile source enforcement program, apply for additional state and federal grants, advocate for legislative actions to increase funding, both at the state and federal level. This could include the DMV fee, for example, or steady funding for the Community Air Protection Program. Redistribution of current budget, but no, the previous discussion, there isn't much flexibility due to funding obligations in regards to how much we're able to redistribute. Prioritization of staff time. This may include needing to cut or potentially put on pause in the interim some current staff activities or priorities. A per capita fee at the city level, which may require state legislation, but this is essentially where each city pays a fee to support APCD's work for Clean Air for All. And there may be other approaches as well that staff hasn't identified, so we'd love to hear that from you all. So are there any other approaches that we should perhaps include? And maybe are there approaches maybe we shouldn't
include or prioritize. But love to hear from you all.
Seeing any hands up, I guess, there's probably a potential, long list of various, systems. And sometimes we like to have the reward system, right? So we'll hear about the carrot system that's more effective than some other kind of system that forces people to do things or costs people more money if they did something that actually causes harm. But I think both, we could probably use both. Maybe we can use one to pay for the other. So what I'm thinking of is particularly in zones in which we have the greatest amount of concern. So these are whether we use the diesel particulate matter map, which has cities throughout our region from Oceanside to San Marcos to my city, La Mesa, all be part of that. That's diesel particulate matter of 75% or higher percentile score. So there's census tracts all over the county that's like that. So if increased pollution is going to be caused there, particularly in the bad days, maybe there should be additional costs. And I'm not sure what mechanism we use to do that. There's a number of them that are available. And then those funds could be used to fund the program itself and potentially provide additional funding to do incentive programs. So I think that kind of strategy needs to be thought of. If we deal with other measurement tools that we have now for the Portside community and the border communities, we know these are communities that have not only the highest amounts of pollution, but we have a plan in place now with some very ambitious goals, right? So there's an 80% reduction in the street plan for those communities identified by 617. So we have a plan. To achieve that, we need to have something in place like that. I don't think transportation planners, all planners, community planners, land use planners know that to make things like this work, it has to be incentivized or a cost factor in place. Otherwise, it won't really work. Unfortunately, our systems are driven by economics. Behavior is driven often by economics. We just saw that with the Youth Opportunity Pass. It wasn't a very expensive thing, but it's improved use of the transit system by youth quite a bit, even though most people think, oh, that's not a huge cost to buy a transit pass. So I think we know that's what's gonna need to happen. And we all know, of course, there's maybe resistance, and that's why I think the public relations and health emphasis that we talked about in the first few prompts, at some point, if all of that's going to take place.
Thank you.
Sure.
I remember the actually.
Yes, I think all of them have merits and also challenges. And just by the nature of what we're doing, facing is going to be one of them. But I think, to me, the way to choose between them would be something that EPA does when they pass a regulation, which I don't know that we do it here. Maybe we do, and I haven't seen it. And that is to say, what is the public health benefit? What is the economic benefit? And do an analysis that then compares what we will achieve by some of these measures. And especially if we're talking about the next to the last per capita fee, which I think would be probably very difficult to get buy-in on. We need to see what are the benefits of it, how does it stack up against the other ones? And I think for me, though, I would be in a better position to choose if I knew that. And I would say that even though I don't know if it's possible to just do it by the pollutants that we regulate, but also maybe by a greenhouse gas, climate change effects of a policy. So let's think a little broader. And that may be the mechanism that'll help us all decide what's the best way to go and how much effort and staff effort to put into it.
Especially when we grow greenhouse gases as well. So the question that I have is more on, like a lot of the agency that we tend to go to and tend to direct the local APCDs is CARB, right? But what is the relationship to EPA? What is the relationship to the other agencies? Just in terms of if there's a possibility of getting resources from them, I don't know. But it could be interesting to explore them. And I say that in the context of GHG being that the conversation, the framing at all levels is GHG, right? And as I'm right now putting my hat up, working at GASA, I'm working on a strategic growth council grant that will facilitate developing housing near transit. And the whole concept is that you're reducing GHG, you're reducing air pollution and whatnot if you build correct housing in the right locations, right? We're partnering with the city of San Diego, we're partnering with MTS. I don't know if there's like a APCD aspect to it, but once again, that's like work that has to happen to influence these agencies to tie APCD into that, right? Because right now it's not required. So it's not required, we're not gonna do it. So it's just an area we can look at and explore a possibility. And that is money that is cap and trade money, right? So I think there could be a synergy around linking all of that.
I also wanted, Gloria, did you want to make?
I have nothing to add. I have all those options. I don't know why you take anything off the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One thing I might want to add to that is the cost savings from having cleaner air. So many years ago, I heard that the county health, the head of county health, I'm not sure what the title would be, give a number that the cost of ill health from our transportation system is costing the county of San Diego $1 billion a year. And that's at least $1 billion a year. So he's talking about the increased cases of cancer, asthma, other illnesses. So when we put in that factor, expending some money, costing some money, is actually our cost savings. So if anyone gave me a proposal for me to pay for something, but I could reduce my healthcare costs, I'm going to see that as a savings, not as a expenditure. So I think that's a different approach we can take. We know we're addressing something that's costing our community healthcare costs. And that's not counting the time, right? Because someone has to take off work and take their child to the emergency room for an asthma attack. That's a tertiary cost. So there's secondary and tertiary effects to air pollution, and that cost isn't coming into the mix. So I think that's what we need to try to bring in.
And the cost to the economy in terms of employees not showing up for work, or having to call in sick and then maybe be replaced. I mean, those are all costs to the economy.
So what I'm hearing a lot is kind of a reframing of economic benefit and cost. And that, what I'm hearing is keep everything on the table. What I'm hearing is, explore relationships at the federal level as well with the EPA in particular, and also the connection between air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, in that sense as well. And I also heard in terms of looking at maybe penalty systems as well to kind of help fund some of these initiatives and incentives. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to thank you all for your engagement and meaningful discussion today. We're certainly going to be in this process, and I'll now turn it over back to Paula to share next steps.
Great. Thank you, Monique. So again, I'm just putting up the timeline for you really quickly. Again, I want to thank you all for your feedback today as well. I'll be following up with the board members that weren't able to join us today individually, just to ensure that their input is also incorporated in this process. And the next step for us will be diving into the development of the draft plan with the hopes of bringing the draft to the policy and planning committee for review prior to bringing it back to the board in September. And as we develop the draft strategic plan, we'll be relying on all the feedback that we've heard, not only today, but from the Planning and Policy Committee and from the vast engagement process that we've been through. And we'll be looking at the development of strategies and timelines to achieve the identified priorities, as well as incorporation of existing plans. We have air quality plans, for example, the plans for the community emission reduction plans. And so we want to ensure that all of the actions we are committed to in those plans are also incorporated here, obviously. And then we'll be looking at an implementation analysis, which will look at, do we have the right staff with the right skill sets, the right materials? So do we have the capability to do what we're setting out to do over the next several years? Do we have the capacity, meaning the resources, including total staff and funding, to address any new priorities? And if not, what actions would we take to pursue additional resources? And then do we have the appropriate culture within the agency to accomplish our new, any new identified priorities? And then what constraints might we run into as we are proceeding down this path? So there's a lot of work that's coming, more to come on this that you'll be hearing in the next few months. And I think we can just go to the next slide and we'll wrap this up. And again, thank you so much for the input that you've provided today. I want to thank Monique and many members of our staff. We brought this process in-house last year, as you'll recall. We started out with a consultant and then decided we could do a better job in-house and get more robust engagement. I'm really proud of all the work that's been done by our staff, and I really think that we've succeeded in doing what we've set out to do thus far in the process. And so now comes the easy part of just writing the plan. That's all. Thank you.
Great, so thank you, Paula. Thank you, Monique. Thank you for the public engagement part of the process. I know that was a lot of work and dealing with all the priorities, and thank you all board members for your contributions as well. And the public, I think we're able to voice their input and provide input, and board members as well, and staff. You guys did a great job involving everybody and getting things down in a way that you could present it to us in a meaningful way. So thank you. Let's go on to E5, which is program spotlight. This is another item that we will be taking action on. It's informational that asks the clerk to provide public testimony instructions.
Thank you, Chair Shu. Those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the Zoom screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9. All public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of staff presentations. Any members of the public present in the conference room that would like to provide testimony on this item may approach the podium.
Okay, let's go ahead and have our staff presentation by Deputy Director Jaime Luther and Chief of Department of Operations William Jacks.
Thank you, Chair Shu, board members. My name is Mayani Luther. I am a Deputy Director overseeing compliance and engineering. The San Diego APCD program Spotlight is intended to provide updates on various programs that support our mission. Today we'll be discussing our compliance programs. This is an informational item only. State law establishes that local air districts have the primary responsibility for enforcing air quality regulations applicable to stationary sources. Our compliance program is designed to ensure sources of air pollution achieve compliance with all applicable rules and regulations to protect public health and the environment. Next slide, please. Let's begin by introducing our team, which has 27 field inspectors, 4 support staff, 4 investigators, 7 supervisors, and a business assistance coordinator. We would like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to this dedicated team for their commitment in safeguarding public health. Their contributions are instrumental in improving air quality and protecting our communities from harmful pollutants. I'll now turn it over to William Jacks, who is the Chief of the Compliance Division, to discuss the various compliance programs. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Shu and board members. Very happy to be here. So during this update, we'll be highlighting 4 key functions of our compliance program: compliance assistance, inspections, air quality complaint investigations, and enforcement. So we're starting with our compliance assistance, as this is an effective way to prevent violations and protect public health. When regulated entities have access to information and know how to comply, they are more likely to do so. We inspect sources of air pollution to verify compliance with air quality regulations, and those inspections are conducted by our 27 field inspectors. So our field inspectors are also available 24/7 to respond to air quality complaints submitted by the public. And finally, the main goal of our enforcement program is to deter non-compliance and ensure a level playing field for all regulated entities, which is achieved through our violation settlement program. Equity and EJ considerations are fully integrated in all compliance functions. It is critical to recognize that one size doesn't fit all, as some communities need more frequent inspections. Compliance assistance provided to small businesses look different than what is provided to large facilities. When responding to complaints, we need to embrace the diversity of our communities, and air quality violations can have more significant cumulative impacts in our EJ communities. Next slide, please. Our compliance assistance is critical to ensure regulated entities fully understand how to comply with air quality regulations. We provide various training opportunities, such as in-person trainings or educational videos to guide industry on how to comply. We handle general inquiries regarding permit conditions and how to submit permit applications. We also publish compliance advisories, typically to inform on existing and upcoming requirements. This slide has a link and QR code where you can find different compliance assistance resources. Next slide, please. We inspect every permitted equipment in the county at least once a year to ensure compliance with applicable regulations. This slide provides some examples of permitted equipment, including engines, boilers, concrete batch plants, and landfills, to name a few. Besides inspecting equipment that is permitted by us, we inspect projects involving the removal of asbestos-containing materials, diesel trucks, and off-road vehicles. Asbestos. Asbestos is associated with serious health effects, including cancer. Therefore, regulating these sources is critical to protect public health. Some of the most serious violations identified by the district are related to asbestos. Diesel vehicles are major contributors of pollutants as well, as they form ozone and emit diesel particulate matter, both of which create adverse health effects. I am proud to say we have the most comprehensive mobile source program in the state. Next slide, please. Our 27 field inspectors conducted over 14,000 inspections in 2023. Our inspections are unannounced, and when we document violations, we conduct follow-up inspections to verify the issue is addressed and compliance is achieved. Sources located in our EJ communities are subject to more frequent inspections for stationary sources, diesel trucks, and idling. These numbers demonstrate our inspectors' unwavering commitment and exemplary service, which is essential in maintaining the well-being of our communities
and the sustainability of our environment. Next slide, please. Another critical function in compliance are investigations of air quality complaints submitted by the public, which promotes opportunities to engage with community members and determine compliance with district rules and regulations. Most complaints report odors, dust, smoke, or improper asbestos removal processes. The public can submit air quality complaints via mobile app, phone, or email, and complaints can be submitted in any language. Next slide, please. As part of our dedication to accountability, transparency, and community involvement, we've launched an interactive mapping tool. Now, with just a few clicks, anyone can access vital information regarding air quality concerns reported by the public. We are pleased to report that in 2023, district inspectors conducted 717 complaint investigations with an average response time of 4.5 hours. This slide provides the link and QR code where the mapping tool can be found. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, under state law, we have the primary responsibility for enforcing air pollution control regulations. Therefore, we take enforcement actions when we document a violation of air quality regulations. Our penalties are established in accordance with state law and to deter non-compliance. We are pleased to report the compliance rates shown on the slide, but we continue to seek opportunities to further increase compliance rates. Next slide, please. This slide shows the penalty amounts collected in 2023. Once again, our primary goal is to deter non-compliance and assist those who have received violations to come back into compliance. Besides collecting monetary penalties, we administer a supplemental environmental project program, or a SEP program, that can fund community-based projects from a portion of the penalties received during settlement of enforcement actions. Those projects can include providing air quality monitoring equipment, residential air filtration, expansion of green spaces, and other projects that provide tangible air quality benefits. Next slide, please. Besides continuing work on our core functions to support our mission of clean air for all, in the next fiscal year, we will put additional focus on transparency by publishing additional data to provide meaningful public engagement. In addition, we will be increasing our focus on professional development opportunities to expand the compliance training program and formalize onboarding training for new staff. Next slide, please. This concludes this update. This is an informational item only, and we are available to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair Shu. We do have one member of the public wishing to provide comment on this item. I'll now call Cesar Javier to the podium, please. Mr. Javier, you will have 3 minutes to provide testimony, and please state your name for the audio record before you begin.
This is the only board that I been attending, that has quality results and accomplishments. Thank you to this board, because I'm learning. And hopefully my input, not critic, my input is one. Compliance has direct correlation with the effective rule, code, or ordinance. For example, I will just give an example. This Rule 11 of the City Municipal Code exempting kiln, which is emitting toxicity. How do you bill if you permit such operation in a populated area, for example? That is one question, because the fee of that permit is a source of budget. Now, how would you now holistically, meaningfully balance? Because if you issue the permit and they do not comply with the rules, it impacts what we dreaded as diseases. Now, how we balance. Permitting and not permitting and its cost. Number two, in the compliance aspect or in the enforcement or in the investigation, we strongly suggest, let's do the easy questions and focus the resources and time, the harder one. So the small spots will be cleared before attending the bigger spot that has been shown in this slide. Those are only the two things that I would like to input. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Shu. We have no additional members of the public requesting to address the board on this item today.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from any of the board members? Questions? Mr. Medina.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. This was really good, succinct, lots of good data. I have a few questions. In terms of the enforcement actions, the violations, could you give us a sense of, in two areas, in stationary sources and in mobile sources, what is a typical type of violation that incurs a fee?
Yeah, sure. So they're fines, and it's a little different fee, but absolutely. But there are two main categories of violations we issue. It's record keeping administrative as well as emissions based. So there is quite a different variety depending on the source category. Historically, probably if we were to quantify, majority probably administrative to ensure facilities are permitted, we're maintaining the record. So when we're not there, the one day we inspect, they can demonstrate compliance the rest of the year. So that is a big part of what we enforce, but also is when we identify emissions based violations. Again, that's the largest focus and can be the highest penalties.
What about mobile sources?
Oh, thank you. So yes, mobile sources, those are penalties that are associated with what CARB allows. So we are in concert, we have an MOU with CARB, and that's how we enforce the mobile sources. So a lot of those, again, it's administrative, but it leads to emission savings, emission impacts, positive emission impacts.
I think, and is there a serious or willful violation also category in this?
Yes, yeah, in the Colorado Health and Safety Code, it breaks down the levels of liability, and that's actually.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from board members? If not, I actually been on a few inspections as ride-alongs. I encourage board members and others to do that. I learned a lot by spending a few hours on one of those, two different inspections. I probably should do another one this year. I look forward to spending time with APD staff and seeing how they actually do an inspection. And I can also say how professional the two that I did, well, I was very impressed with how the inspections were done and the kind of responses we get from those who had the permits. So it was really good. So I really like that. Any other comments? If not, we could bring close to that item. We have two last items on our agenda. One is our report from our pollution control district officer, Paul Forbes.
Good afternoon, Chair. I want to remind the board that we lost a quorum, so I would advise that we continue the final two items, even though they are informational, just to be safe to the next meeting.
So we could continue the last items as you're advising.
Correct. I can also send out my report in writing to the board. If council says that's okay. Yes, okay. So I'll provide that in writing to the board members.
Right. Well, let me just make a comment that's not really a report, but I want to thank again Member Gomez for her time with the subcommittee and with planning. This was a very critical time, the first few years after we developed a new governance here at APCD, and thank you, Georgette, for leading that team and all the changes that you led that planning committee. And the first couple of years was a lot of work a lot of thinking took place, so thank you to Jeff for doing that. With that, I'm gonna call the meeting to a close, seeing that we don't have a quorum. Our next regular meeting of the governing board will be held on May 9th, 2024, at 2 p.m. And 5 p.m. we'll have a budget meeting at that time, at the same date as well. So we are adjourned.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for all your work.
Oh, yeah.